Hey, it looks like we're live now. So good afternoon, everyone in the group. Great to see you here. Today I'm talking to Alex Shrimpton, and we're talking B2B sales. I'll let Alex talk about his experience, but he is an expert in B2B sales, works with various types of businesses, individuals on sales process. Alex, do you want to give your background? What is it that you do? How do you work in sales? What's your sales experience?
Yes, I mean I've been in sales now for probably about 12 years. Or so I started when I was 18 years old doing door-to-door sales, B2C format for gas and electric for Scottish Power.
Yeah,
Worked in probably about 7 or 8 different campaigns over about 4 or 5 year period, working with charities like British Red Cross, Battersea Dogs and Cats Home, PDSA, National Deaf Children's Society. Then also companies like Love Film, which is now Prime Video, dealt with the launch for that in the UK, and then also ADT security system sales as well.
yeah,
Moved into B2B sales. So I suppose on that regard there, I dealt with the training and management of regionalized teams for sales with that as well. So I helped
yeah,
deploy and set up sales training methodologies and systems, and then also the offices themselves, and helped with the day-to-day training of the reps. And that was all over that time period that I was working in that industry. I then about 5 or 6 years ago moved into B2B sales. Started with lead forensics, progressed my way through that. Top sales revenue, multiple months, multiple quarters. Progressed into multiple different promotions in the company, and then was also asked to spearhead their new product that they launched. Again, that was all around kind of working out what was the best go-to-market strategy, what was the
yeah,
best kind of way to pitch that product. So there was a lot of excess learning and training that I needed to do myself. A lot of test bedding and kind of working out what the market looked like and actually what the best way to pitch our product was.
yeah.
It was definitely on a different level to what I'd been used to selling at that point. And then moved from there into mid-market sales in Vulio, which was to do with PR and communication sales.
Yeah.
Expanded my knowledge again in terms of kind of like the tendering process and also needs requirement, those kind of elements. And then likewise, again, I've expanded my knowledge again back into an enterprise sales management role, which is where I'm at now in Infinity.
Nice.
So yeah, about 10 to 12 years worth of sales experience, probably about 5 years worth of that being in a sales training role of sorts.
Yeah, yeah. No, fantastic. There's a lot of obviously a lot of sales experience, but also a lot of varied sales experience, which is awesome. And I think for people in my group, they'll be business owners. They own a limited company, but they are the sole employee of the limited company. And as they're starting to develop their consulting services, I think one of the biggest fears, barriers, blockers, whatever you want to call it, is likely to be around sales and probably around some misconceptions about what they think selling is. So I'd like to ask you first, what do you think about any kind of common misconceptions there are about selling, and how would you counter that? How would you define a good kind of selling role, if you like, scenario?
I think the common conception of or common viewpoint of a salesperson is you think of those PPI salespeople on the phone. You pick up the phone and you're being pitched by someone who's got a script, doesn't really care what your responses are, those kind of things, ...
Yeah.
And you're not really having a conversation with that person. They're there to kind of, it's almost as if a recording could do that. And actually, I think in a lot of cases now they are doing a recording.
I've seen that. I think they are. Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, it's not a sale really at the end of the day. And people have this kind of mentality that if you think about sales, you don't want to come across in that light, and that's totally true. You definitely should not. That is the worst example of sales that I could give,
Yeah.
because there's no value there. The sale itself comes from the value that you bring. There's this whole adage that I've based my entire sales career off, really, which is that price is what you pay, value is what you get.
Yeah.
And that I find is so true, because I'll give you a really good example. Me and my partner, we bought a bed probably about 6 months ago, and I walked into Benson's for Beds, and the assistant sales manager, whoever he was, he walked over and had about all of a 20-second rapport conversation with me, how's your day, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then immediately went in with, what's your budget? What are you looking to spend?
Yeah.
And I can see from a needs perspective why he was asking me that question. He wanted to kind of get an idea as to where we could kind of pitch and what we could talk about. But he went straight in with that, and he was leading on the value, on the points, he was kind of, what's the word? What's the term? He was benefit selling me.
Yeah.
Hadn't really had an understanding as to what I needed, what my interests were, what I was looking for from a bed. Needless to say, we had about a half an hour conversation, looked around the shop a little bit. I was thoroughly disappointed with his patter, his conversation with me, his understanding of my needs. So we walked out of there and walked straight into, I think it was, no, I'm sorry, I'm getting this wrong. It was Dreams that we were in.
Yeah.
It was Benson's for Beds that we went into.
Okay.
Went into Benson's for Beds. Similar kind of situation. Assistant sales manager approaches us. Lovely young lady, very, very, very rapport, very likable. She opened the conversation with, how are you? How's your day? You been up to much? We had about a 5-10 minute conversation before we even got into, what it is we were looking for.
Yeah.
And even then, at that point, she'd asked me, okay, so you're looking for a bed. What is it you're looking for? What is it you're interested in? Tell me about your current bed now. Tell me about your issues. Tell me about your problems. If you could problem solve that bed and you could make it the perfect bed, what would be the one thing that you'd change about it? And she was asking me all these great value building questions that just opened me up massively. And even though the guy in Dreams had said to me, okay, well, my budget was, £700, £800 for a bed. And he said, okay, well, here you go. Here's a £500 bed. We actually ended up spending about £1,200 in Benson's for Beds. So more than what my budget was. Yeah. But I was happy to spend that because she'd understood what I wanted, and the value was there for me, 100%.
So more expensive, but the value was there, where it was completely lacking in the first place.
Exactly, yeah. And that was just purely around her understanding of my needs, my requirements, my issues currently. So that for me is probably one of the best descriptions that I could give you of a great salesperson versus a bad salesperson. And that was because she was purely treating me as she was advising me. And that's, I think, really what you should really look at when it comes to sales. You shouldn't be trying to sell to people and push water up a hill. You should be trying to find people that you can solve a problem for. And that's part of that whole first element there of it, is identifying who it is you want to speak to, who are the right people to speak to. Because I think a lot of the time, people don't really know who their ideal customer are.
No, absolutely. I think it's knowing that ideal customer, that knowing who your audience is, knowing what a good fit is, even within that audience. And I think then, as you say, knowing how you can add value to someone in that scenario, in that situation, based on value, based on understanding them first, putting them first rather than putting your offer first, which I think is what you're describing there in that B2C scenario.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's about taking the time to do that properly.
Yeah. And if that is done properly, then that bed that you purchased, sticking with that example, after making that purchase, did you feel bad about it, or did you feel good about it?
I think buyer's remorse is something that everybody has. I'm guilty of buying, a dozen different stupid things on Amazon, or buying the Facebook ad that comes up that says I should get a kitchen dicer that dices my vegetables 3 times quicker than a knife. Those kind of things, and I'll buy them and then I'll forget about them and I'll get them, 3 weeks later and think, oh, why did I buy that in the end? I think that's inevitable, but actually the value that I found from that call, I look back on that fondly and think, actually, I'd love to be sold to like that again. And that's a bit of an odd thing, probably because I'm a salesperson myself, and I've worked in sales for so long. That's probably my experience of it. But yeah, I think because I enjoyed that experience, I would happily go back to there again and speak to the same person and buy another bed.
Because they took the time to understand you first.
Yeah, exactly. They weren't just oh, he's a cash cow, let's see how much we can get out of him.
Yeah, and I think that changes the perception from, oh, I'm just another number, I'm just another call they've got in their calendar, to actually, no, I do feel that I am it is a good fit. I feel that they have taken the time to understand me and are describing whatever that offer is in a way that aligns to my need. And I always say, that the value is in the gap between, the current situation and what their needs are versus the outcomes that you can deliver. That's where the value is. It's not in your time, it's not in the mechanism, it's not in the assets that come along with whatever that product is, right? The actual value to the end user, the end customer, is in that gap in the middle.
Absolutely.
So for someone who perhaps isn't feeling confident getting into that scenario, what are some of the things that you could suggest to perhaps make that a little bit easier, maybe take the pressure off themselves a little bit as part of that process?
I suppose in your head you should be so number one, absolute core is that you should be speaking to the right people.
Yeah.
I think if you're an accountant and anybody who deals with tax is going to be your ideal prospect. If you're a builder, anyone who's got a house is going to be your prospect. More specifically, anyone who wants to expand their house or do something to the house is going to be a prospect. I think there are some industries that lend themselves to outbound, and there's some industries that lend themselves more to referrals. There's different segments of those sales in terms of a prospecting element of actually assessing an interest, gaining the interest, gaining the impulse, booking a meeting, because that's something that you're creating out of nowhere. Whereas actually a lot of companies, especially kind of smaller businesses, they're like one-man bands, they rely quite heavily on referrals, and those businesses kind of referring businesses into them or expanding existing opportunities. So what I would say is that in terms of the processes, in terms of those different methodologies, so whether it's prospecting and outbounding, and whether it's actually kind of you're having a meeting with someone, at any point it's a conversation, and it needs to be treated that way. It shouldn't be scripted. Yes, have a structure, but shouldn't be scripted to a degree.
Yeah, structure over scripts, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the basic structure that I've always followed, and this was absolute nuts and bolts that I got taught sort of like 10 years ago now, was that each kind of sales interaction, sales conversation comes into sort of 5 steps. And that's introduction, short story, presentation, close, and then your consolidation. So an introduction would be, let's have a think. Hey, is that Matt? Hi, Matt. So appreciate you taking the call. I probably caught you right in the middle of something. Is that right? Yes, you have. Okay, great. My name's Alex. So I'm just calling from Matthew Todd Accountancy. What we do is we specialize in helping businesses of a certain size and a certain type gain correct tax efficiency for their prospects. Now, what we've been doing recently is doing a lot of work with local businesses like yourself, just to kind of help out and see what we can do. What I'd be interested in doing and just getting an understanding from you is how do you deal with your tax at the moment? And that's your kind of, as you're transitioning into that presentation piece, you get a bit more of an understanding around that. Okay, great. Well, one of the things that we're doing at the moment is actually helping organizations just like yourself actually get a bit more streamlined in terms of their tax, getting some of that money back, making sure they can claim the most that they can so that they're not wasting profits. Was wasting profits something that you'd be keen not to do?
Yeah.
Yes, it would be. Great. Well, what I'd suggest is us getting some time in the diary just to talk it through in a bit more detail, and that's as you're going into your close. when works best for you? Next Tuesday, next Thursday.
Yeah.
Great. AM or PM, perfect. So just to clarify, what we're going to do on that call is just talk through XYZ, and then the benefit for you is going to be this, and this. Goal for that call is for you to walk away with a little bit more knowledge. Worst case scenario, you're going to walk away knowing exactly what you're doing is the right thing. Best case scenario, you can walk away with a bit more knowledge. And then there's your consolidation. So that was just something plucked off the top of my head there. But
yeah,
gives you that kind of basic 5-step structure. So, hi, appreciate you taking the call. That's your intro. Short story. Short story. I'm calling from this company. This is the reason why. Presentation, value stack. Let's get an understanding of why that's important for you, if it's important for you.
Yeah.
And then you close. Obviously, that's me booking the meeting. And the consolidation bit is, okay, this is what we're going to go through in that meeting. These are the reasons why it'll be beneficial. And this is the goal from that meeting, to try and help you get this out of it. So that's my basic 5-step structure. And you can apply that to anything. I once used that structure to get a free Subway.
Nice.
There's loads of different ways that you can implement this structure, but it's following that basic structure. You can have it in any kind of format that you'd like, really, with that. But that basic structure will help you gain some kind of control over that. And
it's positioning you as an authority, isn't it? But it's also positioning you as value adding. As you say, you've got that value stack there. You're qualifying them as part of even just that short conversation, aren't you, as well?
Absolutely, yeah. And a great question. If you're going into that call, or if you are doing outbound prospecting and you are calling someone, it's a great thing just to check, if this is right for them. And that's part of that presentation piece. Like, Matt, just to be completely honest, I don't know 100% whether this is going to be valuable for you. Do you mind if I just check?
Yeah.
Yes or no? And if
yes,
it's a yes,
going to be the answer, isn't it?
If it's going to be a yes, if it's a no, they're probably busy. Are you right for me to give you a call back another time? Again, it's just a conversation at the end of the day.
Absolutely. I think that's the way to perceive that and think of that in your mind. Take the pressure off. It's just a conversation, and if you believe in the value that you can add, and I think everybody should have clarity on the value they can add. If they haven't got that, that's something to go back and work on before you try and put yourselves in these scenarios. Otherwise, you are going to feel uncomfortable, and you're probably going to make them feel uncomfortable too. But with that clarity, you can think of that then as a conversation to say, well, are we a good fit? Can I add value to this person?
Exactly. And that's the key thing there. Don't be afraid of that no.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, they stop themselves from doing calls, or stop themselves from putting themselves out there at the fear of that rejection and that no. The other thing you've got to bear in mind is that so there was a little theory they used to teach me called SW3 equals N, and it's a theory of indifference. You need to be indifferent to the outcome that you can't control.
Yeah.
You can't control if someone says yes. You can't control if someone says no, really.
No.
So SW3 equals N, it stands for some will, some won't, so what?
Yeah.
Next call. So that's the basics of it. So if you can't control if someone's going to say yes, but if you can get a no out of them quicker, and they're a no, then it means you're closer to getting a yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like, even in just that short kind of example scenario you played through there, you were saying to the prospect, is that okay with you? Can we see if that works for you? You were asking permission quite early on, but doing it in a non-pushy way, just as part of that dialogue. Is it okay if we have that chat? Does this make sense? So you're getting, and it's not like it's a tactic to get an early yes, no matter what other people might treat you. It's just a dialogue to say, is it worth us having this conversation? Is it useful to you? Is it valuable to you?
Exactly, yeah. And a great point for referrals as well is that if you've got say a builder that's been given a referral by a person, no doubt that prospect that you've been given the referral details for, they've probably been referred to 3 or 4 builders. If you're getting one, they probably had that from other people. So one of the great questions to ask at that point is, what's going to be really important to you? In the service that we're going to provide, you're looking to get an extension. Okay, what is it you're looking for? What are going to be the really important points for you? Okay, it's going to be quality, it's going to be budget, it's going to be timelines, how quickly we can get that done, how sturdy that's going to be. Is there going to be longevity in it? Is there going to be a guarantee? Are there going to be any problems? Those kind of things. So asking straight out of the gate, what are the most important things to you? Gives them the clarity of what in their mind they're looking for. So then you can then go back to them and say, okay, so just to clarify, so the things that are important for you are going to be getting it completed by this date. Yes. Okay. And getting it under this budget. Yes. Okay. And getting the quality of it so that it's a sustainable structure. It's built for the long term. Great. So if we can get all three of those things there and you're satisfied with that, are you happy to go with us? So see, what I've done there is I've used the value points that they've given me to then structure into the reason why they should come with me.
Absolutely. So you're not going with a canned pitch as such or anything else. You're going entirely based on their need and their articulation of where they see the value as well.
Exactly. And that's the real point, because the prospect's never going to see the value that you have in your mind. Your product, your service could be the best in the world. But if they don't see that and it doesn't fit their problem, then they're never going to buy from you in a million years.
I 100%. I think that is so key. And I think that is probably the most common mistake I see people making, is that they don't truly understand that. And they'll think it's about me understanding their problems to say, oh yeah, I know exactly what needs to be done. Straight into the pitch, this is the right thing for you. And it's not about you understanding whether it's the right thing as the supplier. You need them to develop that understanding themselves. You need them to articulate it. And I think I would say have the patience to let them work through that in the call. Your role in that call at that stage is to help them work through it, not for you to get the information to decide whether it's right to pitch, I would say.
Absolutely. And I'll give you a really good example of this. This wasn't me. This is a case study for someone else actually. But small marketing agency, about 3 people, had a lucky referral that came in actually to a large utility provider in the UK. Now this provider was working with a massive global agency. They were spending 500 million, I think it was, per annum with them. Huge amounts of money. And this pitch came in for a specific task, specific project they were looking to do. Now, the agency was going to bill them something in the region of about 2 million for this particular project, just straight off the bat. Now, what this agency did, that actually went in, had a meeting with the client, sat down, talked it through, and it was a bit of an annoying meeting for the company, for the utility company. And I'll tell you why. It's because they had the agency themselves asked thousands of questions.
Right.
They were the idiot for all intents and purposes. They were asking the questions like, I'm sorry, can I just confirm, I'm sorry to be the one to ask this question again, but, just to clarify, this is what okay, could you explain that a little bit more? Can you elaborate on that? Let's just really get to the crux of what are the key points here, those kind of things. So they'd had this 2-hour conversation with them around, all of these key elements. And it turned out that actually this was a game-changing contract that the agency won in the end. So they ended up billing this utility provider about 4 million.
Yeah.
So twice as much as the agency were going to bill them. But it was around an exact requirement of what they needed.
Right.
So even though the agency were then billing them 2 million, it would only have hit about 60% of their true brief.
Right, I see.
But the agency, because they'd spent that 2 hours actually really understanding exactly what was required, the utility company was absolutely happy to spend double the money on that to get exactly what they needed. And that's a true problem that I think is a loss for a lot of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you can understand their requirement, their need, and the value, you should never feel guilty which I see some people do, or nervous and guilty, sometimes about making the offer. Because if you've had that conversation right and taken the time to let them do most of the talking with you asking the right questions, then the offer is very straightforward. So what's the way that we get this value? It's as simple as that. And if you're nervous, undercharging, under kind of representing the value that can add, you're not only doing yourself a disservice, but you're also doing them a disservice, I would say.
Exactly.
And I think it's interesting how you've given a few examples of people potentially paying more for something. So price-wise, the price was higher, but the value was way, way higher again. So they got far more value out of something that, on paper had a higher price, had a higher cost.
And I think that converts quite well into the flip side of that too, is that people can pay on this hourly model for certain things, and the quality that you receive for that kind of element there, the level of professionalism and the level of detail and personalization that goes into that is much less, because it is an out of the box solution. It is an out of the box package. I'm giving you 30 hours of my time, and I'm saying that my time is worth that amount. It's not based on a value increase for me. I've always worked in sales, so commission's always been a very key part of my job, and my earning potential. So I've always wanted to know, okay, well, if I can bring in this deal or close this opportunity for this value, then what's in it for me? What's the wider opportunity there? And I can scope it better, and actually I'll put more time into it if I know that I'm going to get a better value out of it for me.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating. I think that's really, really interesting. I think we could quite obviously talk for many, many hours about this, but I want to be respectful of your time. And I think we've already given people in this group a lot to think about. So I'm going to wrap it up shortly before we go too further, because I'd like to leave people with focus on the key points that we've talked about. We can talk about other elements of structure, technical, anything else, objection handling, whatever it may be. But I think actually the things that we've talked about, that value first approach, understanding the client and their needs, putting that before your own, I think that's the takeaway that I think people should go away with from this conversation.
I think the only other one thing that I'd probably add as a habitual method that I've implemented for me, I got taught very early on that actually self-analysis is very important. So especially when you're doing outbound sales or doing anything really, whether it's creating presentations, whether it's streamlining processes, those kind of things, it's the whole idea of review, adjust, apply. And that whole process should be a continual circle, always renewing, reviewing, adjusting, applying, reviewing, adjusting, applying. And this goes for anything, especially when it comes to your pitch, your intro, your presentation. It's you actually taking some time after you've done that, or at the end of your day, marking down how many calls that you've made, how far have you got into your calls, what are your objections that you're coming up with, and then actually at the end of the day thinking, okay, well, I've had this objection quite a lot of times, what would be the one thing, how could I kind of problem solve that or overcome that? How could I structure something so that if I had that answer again, what would I say to it? So it's not something you haven't got a wrench thrown into a wheel and then you've thrown yourself over the handlebars. You've got a plan in place that's going to help you kind of improve that next time.
Absolutely.
It's just, it gives you that kind of self-identification of you, and it gives you the tools to be able to kind of improve yourself day to day. And that for me in sales has always been really important, because it's about adjusting and working out, okay, well, my intro could have been better there, or this objection handle could have been better, or I could have used an impulse factor in a different way, or, I didn't quite build the value enough. The pain wasn't there. The problem wasn't solved. All these kind of things. Here, if you write them down and work them out in your head, actually, it becomes a lot simpler and a lot more straightforward.
Absolutely.
So I think there's a lot of complication there that I think is in a lot of people's minds about how to do sales and how that works. But if you keep it like a conversation, you know that you're not afraid of that no, but then also on the back of it, you're reviewing, you're adjusting, you're applying. You'll always improve. You'll always move forward.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, reviewing, definitely the ones that went well, the ones that didn't go well. There'll be mistakes even in the ones that did go well, and understand why that was. The value was obviously there. So I think, yeah, as you say, I think it's not just about an outcome of the call being a yes or a no. It's about learning from those calls as well to see how you can improve the next time. Think of it as a process of improvement and a continual journey, I would say.
Absolutely.
Cool. Awesome. So, Alex, thank you so much for this chat. It was really, really interesting. I found it interesting. I'm sure that everyone in the group as well is going to get a lot of value from this as well. I'll add you to the group. I'll tag you in this post as well, so you can kind of see any questions that come in, etc. And
no worries.
I'm sure we'll have a second call going off the back of this one as well. It'd be great to talk about some of the specifics in more depth. But for now, thank you once again for the call, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
No worries. Speak soon. Take care.